Rasputin, the mystic who controlled an empire, the wild-eyed prophet who whispered in the Tsarina's ear. But on the frozen night of December 29, 1916, Russian nobles decided his reign of influence had to end. According to the conspirators themselves, they poisoned him with enough cyanide to kill an elephant. They shot him point-blank in the chest. They beat him until his skull cracked. And still, by their own account, he crawled through the snow, gasping their names. What happened in that palace basement wasn't just murder. It was a battle against something that refused to accept death itself. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 2,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these histories matter. The winter of 1916 was brutal in St. Petersburg, but nothing compared to the cold calculation in Prince Felix Yusupov's heart. For months, he and his fellow conspirators had watched Grigory Rasputin manipulate the Russian throne, his filthy peasant hands guiding the fate of millions. The empire was crumbling. The war was bleeding Russia dry. And at the center of it all stood this unwashed Siberian monk who claimed to heal the Tsarevich's hemophilia through prayer alone. Yusupov, one of the wealthiest men in Russia, had decided enough was enough. What the prince didn't know was that he was about to participate in the most terrifying murder attempt in modern history. Rasputin had survived assassination attempts before. Knives had been thrust at him. Threats had been hurled. But he moved through St. Petersburg like a man protected by invisible forces, drinking himself into oblivion night after night, seducing noble women, and returning to the palace each morning as if nothing could touch him. The common people whispered that he possessed dark powers. The nobles knew only that he had to die. Yusupov's plan seemed foolproof. He would lure Rasputin to his palace with the promise of meeting his beautiful wife, Irina. Once there, in the specially prepared basement dining room, cakes and wine laced with potassium cyanide would do the work. The poison had been provided by Dr. Stanislaus Lazovert, carefully measured to deliver a dose powerful enough to kill 5 men instantly. They ground the crystals into powder, mixed them into the pink icing of the cakes, and poured them into the Madeira wine. Everything was ready. At 11 o'clock that night, Rasputin arrived at the palace wearing his finest silk blouse, his hair freshly washed for once, eager to meet the princess. Yusupov led him down the stone steps to the basement, decorated to look like an intimate dining room. A fire crackled in the hearth. The gramophone played gentle music, and on the table sat the poisoned feast. Yusupov watched in growing horror as Rasputin reached for the first cake. The monk bit into it, chewed, swallowed. Nothing. He reached for another, commenting on how delicious they were. Still nothing. Rasputin poured himself a glass of the poisoned wine and drank deeply, smacking his lips with satisfaction. Yusupov felt his blood turn to ice. The mystic consumed cake after cake, glass after glass, enough cyanide now coursing through his system to kill a dozen men. 2 hours passed. Rasputin sat there alive, chatting pleasantly about his influence over the Tsarina, occasionally complaining of a slight burning in his throat, but otherwise completely unaffected. Upstairs, the other conspirators, Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, Vladimir Purishkevich, Dr. Lazovert, and Lieutenant Sukhotin, waited in disbelief. The poison had failed completely. Yusupov excused himself and rushed upstairs, pale and shaking. His fellow conspirators stared at him in shock. How was this possible? Had the cyanide somehow degraded? Was the monk truly protected by supernatural forces? They argued in frantic whispers until finally, Dmitri pressed a Browning revolver into Yusupov's trembling hand. There was only one option left. The prince returned to the basement, his heart hammering against his ribs. He suggested Rasputin examine a beautiful crucifix on the cabinet, positioning himself carefully behind the monk. Rasputin stood, admiring the cross, his back turned. Yusupov raised the revolver, aimed at the chest, and fired. The explosion echoed through the basement. Rasputin's body jerked backward and crumpled to the floor, blood spreading across his silk blouse. He lay motionless on the bearskin rug, eyes staring at nothing. The conspirators rushed down the stairs, examined the body, checked for a pulse. Nothing. Rasputin was finally dead. They covered the corpse with a cloth and went upstairs to celebrate, their hands still shaking from adrenaline. Dr. Lazovert prepared to leave and fetch the chains they would need to weight down the body before dumping it in the river. But Yusupov felt an inexplicable pull to return to the basement one final time, to look upon the face of the man they had killed. What happened next would haunt him until his dying day. Yusupov descended the stairs alone, approaching the covered body. He knelt beside it, pulling back the cloth to examine Rasputin's face. The features were peaceful, almost serene, and then the eyes opened. Rasputin's pale blue eyes locked onto Yusupov's face with an intensity that froze the prince's soul. Before he could scream, Rasputin's hand shot up and grabbed him by the throat. The dead man was alive, whispering Yusupov's name like a curse, his grip tightening with impossible strength. Yusupov tore himself free and scrambled backward as Rasputin lurched to his feet, blood pouring from the wound in his chest. The mystic's face contorted with rage and pain as he staggered toward the stairs, climbing them on hands and knees. Yusupov's screams brought the other conspirators running, but Rasputin had already reached the courtyard door. He burst outside into the freezing night, the temperature well below zero, wearing nothing but his blood-soaked blouse and velvet trousers. Vladimir Purishkevich grabbed his revolver and ran after the wounded man. In the snow-covered courtyard, he saw Rasputin crawling on all fours toward the locked gate, leaving a trail of blood behind him in the pristine white snow. The monk was making guttural sounds, either prayers or curses, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Purishkevich raised his weapon and fired. The first shot went wide. He fired again, hitting Rasputin in the back. The mystic stumbled but kept crawling. Purishkevich steadied his shaking hand, aimed carefully at the back of Rasputin's head, and fired the third shot. This time, Rasputin collapsed face down in the snow, his body finally motionless. The conspirators surrounded him, staring at the bleeding figure in the snow. How many times did this man need to die? But they weren't taking chances anymore. Fear had replaced their earlier confidence. They dragged Rasputin's body back into the palace courtyard, and in a frenzy of terror, beat him with a rubber club, the impacts crushing bone. They wanted to ensure that whatever force animated this man could never bring him back again. At 2 o'clock in the morning, they wrapped the battered, bullet-riddled body in a heavy cloth, bound it with thick rope, and loaded it into a car. They drove through the silent streets of St. Petersburg to the Malaya Nevka River, where the ice had been broken earlier to create a hole. Without ceremony, without prayer, they pushed Grigory Rasputin's body through the gap and watched it disappear beneath the black water. If stories like this fascinate you, where history becomes horror and documented facts seem impossible, subscribe right now. We dig into the extreme mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about human limits. But the nightmare wasn't over. When authorities recovered Rasputin's body from the frozen river the next day, the autopsy revealed something that sent chills through everyone who heard it. There was water in his lungs. If that just sent chills down your spine, smash that like button, because we're not done yet. Rasputin had been alive when they threw him into the river. After consuming enough poison to kill multiple men, after being shot 3 times, after having his skull fractured by savage beating, Grigory Rasputin had still been breathing when he hit that freezing water. His hands had been found raised and partially freed from the ropes, suggesting he had tried to claw his way out from under the ice. The official cause of death wasn't the poison or the gunshots or the beating. It was hypothermia and drowning. How do we explain what happened in Yusupov Palace that night? The theories are as conflicting as the evidence itself. Some medical experts suggest the cyanide might have degraded through improper storage or been neutralized by the acidic wine. Others point to possible alcohol tolerance from Rasputin's legendary drinking. A few argue the poison was never administered properly at all. The truth is, we don't really know, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes this story so unsettling. The gunshot wound analysis is equally murky. Did the bullet miss vital organs? Was adrenaline enough to keep him moving despite catastrophic trauma? The autopsy reports themselves contain contradictions, and Yusupov's own account changed over the years, growing more dramatic with each retelling. But here's what I believe cuts through all the speculation. Whether the poison failed due to chemistry or chance, whether the bullets missed by inches or millimeters, Rasputin survived long enough to terrify his killers because of one unshakable reality, an almost inhuman will to live. This was a man who had survived the brutal poverty of Siberia, who had walked thousands of miles on religious pilgrimages, who had conditioned his body through extremes most of us can't imagine. That night, the conspirators weren't just fighting flesh and bone. They were fighting the most primal force in existence, the desperate, clawing refusal to surrender. What makes this story truly chilling isn't whether Rasputin possessed supernatural powers. It's that ordinary men, driven by fear and conviction, became capable of such relentless brutality. And still the man wouldn't die. That night revealed something dark about human nature itself on both sides of the murder. The mad monk of St. Petersburg died in the freezing waters of the Neva River over a century ago, but the questions still echo through history. What does it take to kill a man who refuses to die? And how much of what we know is legend versus truth? Rasputin's death became one of history's most repeated stories, told and retold until fact and folklore blurred together. The witnesses themselves couldn't agree on what happened. The evidence contains gaps and contradictions, and perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Some events are too extreme for a single, clean explanation. What we do know is this: 3 months after Rasputin's murder, revolution consumed Russia. The Romanov dynasty fell. The conspirators who killed him, believing they were saving their country, discovered they had only accelerated its collapse. Yusupov spent the rest of his life haunted by those pale blue eyes opening in the basement, that iron grip on his throat, the whispered curse that seemed to echo through the decades. Whether the details match reality perfectly or not, the impact was devastatingly real. Was it failed science, extraordinary biology, exaggerated storytelling, or something beyond rational explanation? The evidence points in multiple directions, and historians still argue over which version to believe. Share your theories in the comments, because this story has fascinated and divided researchers for over 100 years. If you want more investigations into history's most extreme mysteries, the events that challenge what we think we understand about human limits, then subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell. We examine the stories where history blurs into horror, where documented facts seem impossible. Like this video if Rasputin's impossible death left you questioning what really happened that night, and check out our previous video. Thanks for watching, and remember, the best historical mysteries are the ones we can never fully solve.